Welcome to a deep dive into low-carb diets. I'm really interested to learn more about this way of eating, and the Spanish Wikipedia article seems like a great place to start.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty good resource to use. I think you'll find it really interesting.
So let's start with the basics. What exactly is a low-carb diet?
Well, the article defines it as a diet that restricts carbohydrates
Okay.
and usually replaces those carbs with foods higher in protein and fat.
So things like meat and cheese and nuts.
Exactly. All that good stuff.
And the article also mentions that the specific amount of carbs allowed can actually vary a lot between different low-carb diets.
Yeah, the term low carb can be a bit tricky.
Yeah.
It's sometimes used pretty loosely. But generally speaking, it applies to diets where less than 20% of your daily calories come from carbs.
Okay, so it's not just about cutting back a little bit. It's a pretty significant change in your eating habits.
That's right. And to give you an even clearer picture, some experts like Volek suggest a more specific definition of less than 130 grams of carbs per day.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's kind of like a target to keep in mind as we explore this further.
Exactly.
Great. Now, the article mentions weight control as a primary reason people go low carb.
Yeah.
But is it really all about just fitting into those skinny jeans? Or is there more to it?
Well, weight loss is definitely a big motivator.
Right.
But it's not the whole story.
All right.
Clinical trials have shown that these diets can actually improve risk factors for some pretty serious conditions, like insulin resistance and cardiovascular disease.
Wow. I never realized it could have such a broad impact on health. So it could potentially help prevent or manage things like diabetes and heart disease, even high blood pressure.
Absolutely. All of those things.
That's amazing.
And that kind of brings us to another term you might have heard floating around.
Okay.
Ketogenic diets.
Oh, yeah. Keto is everywhere these days.
It is.
But how does it connect to low carb?
Well, ketogenic diets are basically like a more extreme version of low carb.
Okay.
They restrict carbs even further to induce a metabolic state called ketosis. Yeah, basically your body shifts gears and starts burning fat for fuel instead of glucose.
Wow. So if low carb is turning down the volume on carbs, keto is hitting the mute button.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
That's pretty cool. And it's interesting that the article mentions that some popular low carb diets, like the Atkins diet, actually have ketogenic phases.
Yeah, they do.
That makes sense. But before we go too deep into the keto rabbit hole, the article also mentions some interesting benefits for people with digestive issues.
You're right. It specifically talks about how some individuals with inflammatory bowel disease or irritable bowel syndrome,
IBD and IBS?
Yes, find relief from their symptoms on a low-carb diet.
Okay.
For example, you might notice a significant reduction in bloating, which is a really common symptom of IBS.
Oh, that's interesting. So even if you're not focused on weight loss, going low carb could be a tool for managing those conditions.
It's definitely a possibility. And, it's worth mentioning that other similar diets like the paleo or the low FODMA diet are also sometimes used for this purpose.
Oh, interesting.
They all kind of focus on eliminating certain types of food that can trigger digestive discomfort.
Gotcha. So it's like a whole category of diets that can help with that.
Exactly.
But then right when I'm thinking, this all sounds pretty great, the article throws in this pretty serious caveat.
Oh.
Something about celiac disease.
Yeah, this is important information for anyone considering a low-carb diet.
Okay.
The article highlights that while symptom improvement on a low-carb diet might point to celiac disease or gluten sensitivity, it could also delay a proper diagnosis and the correct treatment, which is a strict, lifelong gluten-free diet.
Oh, wow. So someone might mistakenly think their digestive issues are resolved by going low carb when they actually have a more serious condition that needs a completely different approach.
Exactly. And untreated celiac disease can lead to some pretty serious long-term health consequences. Like it can increase the risk of osteoporosis, which weakens the bones and makes them more prone to fractures.
It's definitely something to consider. So while there are potential benefits, it's not a cure-all and definitely shouldn't replace proper medical advice if you're experiencing digestive issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Always best to get a diagnosis and work with a healthcare professional.
Great advice. So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive into low-carb diets.
We have.
We've defined what they are, explored some of the potential benefits, and even uncovered a few important things to watch out for.
It's been a good start.
But there's so much more to discover.
There is.
So in part 2, we'll delve deeper into the science behind how low-carb diets actually work on a physiological level.
Okay.
And explore some of the potential downsides and controversies.
Sounds good.
I think you'll find it really eye-opening.
I'm sure I will.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right, we're back. and ready to uncover the science behind low-carb diets. Like, how do they actually work?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to insulin. You see, when you eat carbohydrates, your body breaks them down into glucose, which then enters your bloodstream.
Okay.
And this triggers the release of insulin, which helps your cells absorb and use that glucose for energy.
So insulin is kind of like a shuttle, moving the glucose from the bloodstream into our cells where it can be used as fuel.
Exactly. Now, when you significantly reduce your carb intake on a low-carb diet, you also reduce those big insulin spikes.
Oh, I see.
And this forces your body to find alternative energy sources, primarily fat.
Okay.
And that's one of the key reasons why low-carb diets are often linked to weight loss.
So by changing what we eat, we're actually changing how our bodies generate energy.
That's right.
That's pretty amazing. But what about those other health benefits we talked about? Like, how does insulin play a role there?
Well, beyond weight loss, stabilizing blood sugar and reducing insulin levels can improve insulin sensitivity.
Okay.
And that's crucial for preventing and managing type 2 diabetes.
Right. And we talked about the heart health benefits as well.
Huh.
How does that fit into the picture?
Think of it this way. Low-carb diets often lead to improvements in several key markers of cardiovascular health.
Like what?
Well, like lower triglycerides, higher good HDL cholesterol,
Okay.
and sometimes even lower blood pressure.
Wow.
These positive changes are likely due to a combination of factors, including the weight loss we discussed, reduced inflammation, and of course that improved blood sugar control from insulin regulation.
So many things happening. But, with any popular diet trend, there are always some dissenting voices.
Right.
Are there downsides or controversies surrounding low-carb diets that we should be aware of?
That's a really good question. It's always important to consider the full picture. And some critics argue that these diets are too restrictive
Okay.
and could lead to nutrient deficiencies, especially if they aren't carefully planned.
That makes sense. If you're cutting out entire food groups,
Right.
you'd need to make sure you're getting those essential vitamins and minerals from other sources.
Exactly.
Are there any specific nutrients that are often lacking on low-carb diets?
Well, one potential issue is fiber,
Okay.
which is primarily found in plant-based foods like fruits, vegetables, and whole grains.
Right.
Many low-carb diets limit these foods. So it's important to find ways to incorporate fiber from other sources, like low-carb vegetables and certain types of nuts and seeds.
Okay.
Otherwise, you might experience digestive issues like constipation.
Oh, right. That makes sense. Now, we've talked a lot about the potential positive effects on things like weight and heart health.
Yeah.
But are there any concerns about potential negative impacts from a long-term high-fat diet?
That's another important consideration. Some experts worry about the potential long-term effects of a diet high in saturated fat,
Okay.
which is often found in animal products like meat and dairy.
Right.
While some research suggests that saturated fat might not be as harmful as previously thought,
Okay.
it's still an area of ongoing debate.
So the jury's still out on that one. It seems like the key takeaway here is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What works for one person might not be right for another.
Right. It's essential to remember that any dietary change should be made in consultation with a healthcare professional, especially if you have any underlying health conditions.
Couldn't agree more.
Great advice. So we've explored the potential benefits as well as some of the caveats, but there's one more aspect of low-carb diets I'm curious about: the social side of things.
Yeah.
The Wikipedia article didn't really touch on this, but I imagine it can be tricky to stick to this way of eating
Right.
when everyone else is enjoying pizza and birthday cake,
You're absolutely right. That's a factor that's often overlooked in scientific studies.
Right.
The social and psychological aspects of any diet can be just as important as the physiological ones.
I've definitely felt that struggle myself. It's easy to feel isolated or left out when you're constantly having to say no to foods that are such a big part of social gatherings and cultural traditions.
Exactly. And that's where finding support systems and strategies for navigating those situations becomes so important. Connecting with others who are following a similar eating plan can make you feel less alone.
Right.
And learning how to modify recipes to fit your needs, or bringing your own low-carb dish to share,
Okay.
can make it easier to participate without feeling deprived.
So it's not just about willpower,
Yeah.
It's about being proactive and finding ways to make this lifestyle work for you.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between achieving your health goals and enjoying your life.
That's a great point. As we've been talking, I've been thinking about how we've focused on the physical effects of low-carb diets. But what about the connection between carbohydrates and our mental and emotional well-being?
Oh, it's a great point.
We briefly touched on this earlier, but I'd love to delve deeper.
That's a fantastic point and an area that definitely deserves more attention. You know, the food we eat doesn't just affect our bodies.
Yeah.
It influences our brains too.
I'm really intrigued. Can't wait to explore that connection in part 3.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our low-carb deep dive.
Here we are.
And I'm really fascinated by this whole idea of carbohydrates and how they affect our mental well-being. You know, it's something we don't always think about when we talk about diets.
Right. It's really important, though.
Yeah.
You see, carbohydrates play a role in producing serotonin.
Serotonin.
Yeah, it's a neurotransmitter that's often called the feel-good chemical.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, like, eating carbs can actually impact our mood.
Exactly. There's definitely a link there.
Yeah.
Serotonin is involved in regulating so many things.
Like what?
Mood, sleep, appetite, even pain perception.
Wow.
When your serotonin levels are balanced, you generally feel calmer, happier, more focused.
That makes so much sense. But hold on. If low-carb diets restrict carbs, doesn't that mean they could mess with our serotonin levels and make us feel worse?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's something to be mindful of for sure, especially when you're first starting the low-carb diet.
Okay.
Some people do experience mood swings, irritability, or even feelings of depression as their bodies adjust.
So it's not always easy, even if you're seeing those positive changes in your weight or blood sugar?
Right. It's crucial to listen to your body and pay attention to any shifts in your mental and emotional state.
Got it.
If you're struggling, it might be a sign that you need to adjust your approach.
Okay.
Maybe incorporate more complex carbs, or focus on other mood-boosting strategies like exercise and stress management.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot.
Right.
Where you're getting the benefits of carb restriction without totally sacrificing your mental well-being.
Exactly. And it's worth noting that the long-term effects of low-carb diets on mood are still being studied.
Oh.
But interestingly, some research suggests that after that initial adjustment period, many people actually report improvements in mood and cognitive function.
Oh, really? So it gets better?
It can, for a lot of people.
Right.
There are a few theories about why this might be.
Like what?
Well, it could be due to the stabilizing effects on blood sugar,
Okay.
the increased intake of healthy fats, or even other factors we haven't fully uncovered yet. There's so much more to learn.
It's amazing how much is still unknown about how our bodies work.
It really is.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. We've gone from the basic definition of low-carb diets to the complex science behind how they might impact our health.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
And even explored that fascinating connection between carbs and our mental and emotional state.
It's been a great journey.
It really has. It seems like the biggest takeaway here is that low-carb diets can be a powerful tool for improving health, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Absolutely. It's about making informed choices, paying attention to how you